Welcome to the You Are Loved Ministry Tell Me a Bible Story podcast with Pam and Brenda Porch. We've been studying the life of Moses, and I'm really enjoying looking at this story. Today, our story begins with Moses and Aaron going to speak to Pharaoh, but it's not going to go well. Pharaoh just keeps increasing the burdens of God's people, and the people have stopped believing in Moses.
Well, Pharaoh's determined to keep his thumb on the Hebrews, afraid they'll take over his country as their numbers have grown so much since Joseph's time. And when Moses and Aaron approach him asking for permission for their people to go worship God, Pharaoh says this in Exodus 5:2. Who is the Lord that I should obey his voice to let Israel go? I do not know the Lord, nor will I let Israel go. Now, I can hear the ominous music from Jaws start at this point. But then Pharaoh goes a step further. The people have been making bricks for Egypt, but now he says they have to start finding the materials to do that and still meet their quotas. The raw materials have been provided up until then by their captors. Okay, let's see what God says to that in Exodus 7, verses 1 to 13. And the Lord said to Moses, see, I have made you like God to Pharaoh, and your brother Aaron shall be your prophet. You shall speak all that I command you, and your brother Aaron shall tell Pharaoh to let the people of Israel go out of his land. But I will harden Pharaoh's heart, and though I multiply my signs and wonders in the land of Egypt, Pharaoh will not listen to you. And then I will lay my hand on Egypt and bring my hosts, my people, to the children of Israel out of the land of Egypt by great acts of judgment. The Egyptians shall know that I am the Lord when I stretch out my hand against Egypt and bring out the people of Israel from among them. Moses and Aaron did so. They did just as the Lord commanded them. Now Moses was 80 years old and Aaron 83 years old when they spoke to Pharaoh. Then the Lord said to Moses and Aaron, when Pharaoh says to you, prove yourselves by working a miracle, then you shall say to Aaron, take your staff and cast it down before Pharaoh, and then it will become a serpent. So Moses and Aaron went to Pharaoh and did just as the Lord commanded. Aaron cast down his staff before Pharaoh and his servants, and it became a serpent. But then Pharaoh summoned the wise men and the sorcerers, and they, the magicians of Egypt, also did the same by their secret arts. For each man cast down his staff, and they became serpents. But Aaron's staff swallowed up their staffs. Still, Pharaoh's heart was hardened, and he would not listen to them as the Lord had said. Okay, simple miracles alone aren't going to do it. And God knows this. His plan for this arrogant, cruel leader is much more impressive.
Oh, I try to get this mental picture of one snake swallowing up all the other snakes. And also I think, wow, these magicians, I don't know how they did that. And it's probably by some power that I don't want to have anything to do with.
Could be.
But I always have when I hear the verses, I always have two thoughts. First, I think, Pharaoh, you have no idea who you're up against. And you want to fight with God? But, yep. And, he had his chance. This wasn't the first time that Moses nicely asked to let the people go. But nice is about to be gone forever. Second, I'm a bit amazed that the sorcerers could do what appeared to be the very same thing as Moses was doing. Now, God says in verse 3 and 4 that God will harden Pharaoh's heart. So basically, God could prove beyond a shadow of a doubt just who he is. But it seems to me that Pharaoh's heart was already pretty hard before God even said that. Hey, what do you think?
Well, the phrase hardening the heart has always confused me. We know that every person has a choice, whether they will obey God or not. But God knows what each heart is full of, a desire to obey or a determination to disobey. And he knows what choice each of us will make at any minute of our lives. But perhaps he just increases the determination already in the heart to get the show on the road. Pharaoh has been cruel and unfair to the people for a long time before this happens.
Yes. He wasn't a nice guy. It's not like God took a really nice guy and made him an evil guy. No.
Wasn't a smart guy either, but yeah.
No, he really wasn't. All right. Exodus 7:14 through 25. Then the Lord said to Moses, Pharaoh's heart is hardened. He refuses to let the people go. Go to Pharaoh in the morning as he is going out to the water and stand at the bank of the Nile to meet him. And take in your hand the staff that turned into a serpent. And you shall say to him, the Lord, the God of the Hebrews, have sent me to you, saying, let my people go, that they may serve me in the wilderness. But so far you have not obeyed. Thus says the Lord, by this you shall know that I am the Lord. Behold, with the staff that is in my hand, I will strike the water that is in the Nile, and it shall turn into blood. The fish in the Nile shall die. The Nile will stink, and the Egyptians will grow weary of drinking water from the Nile. And the Lord said to Moses, say to Aaron, take your staff and stretch out your hand over the waters of Egypt, over the rivers, their canals, and their ponds, and their pools of water, so that they may become blood, and there shall be blood throughout all of the land of Egypt, even in the vessels of wood and vessels of stone. Moses and Aaron did as the Lord commanded. In the sight of Pharaoh and in the sight of his servants, he lifted up the staff and struck the water in the Nile, and the water in the Nile turned into blood. And the fish in the Nile died, and the Nile stank. So the Egyptians could not drink water from the Nile. There was blood throughout all the land of Egypt, but the magicians of Egypt did the same by their secret arts. So Pharaoh's heart remained hardened, and he would not listen to them, as the Lord had said. Pharaoh turned and went into his house, and he did not take even this to his heart. And all the Egyptians dug around the Nile for water to drink, for they could not drink the water of the Nile. 7 full days passed after the Lord had struck the Nile. Wow, just wow. I mean, where do I begin? Blood has a smell. Dead fish have a smell. Every place there's water, it's turned to blood. The lakes, the rivers, the streams, even water in containers. And there's no place to find something good to drink. And the whole place had to absolutely stink. And it lasted a week, 7 days. Now, I don't know how the magicians did the same trick, but wait a minute. If they could turn the water into blood, why didn't they turn the blood back into water? Wouldn't that have proved their power and helped out the Egyptians? I'll bet they were wishing that they had believed Moses the first time, right about this time, don't you, Pam?
I would do it. But I love your point about the magicians not being able to undo the bloody water. I mean, very impressive. You made it happen more. It's all right. It's already been done big time. You better take it apart. Anyway, and about the smelliness, even the unwashed people would have been stinky. I don't know if the magicians were illusionists, maybe able to make it seem like they were doing the same things God was doing, or if Satan was giving them abilities. His demons can do powerful tricks to convince people to trust the wrong people or to distrust God. Either way, God's starting with the easy stuff, and it's going to get harder and harder to keep up with him. So let's look at chapter 8, verses 1 through 10. Then the Lord said to Moses, go into Pharaoh and say to him, thus says the Lord, let my people go that they may serve me. But if you refuse to let them go, behold, I will plague all your country with frogs. The Nile shall swarm with frogs that shall come up into your house and into your bedroom and on your bed and into the houses of your servants and your people and into your ovens and your kneading bowls. The frogs shall come up on you and on your people and on all your servants. And the Lord said to Moses, say to Aaron, stretch out your hand with your staff over the rivers, over the canals, and over the pools, and make frogs come up on the land of Egypt. So Aaron stretched out his hand over the waters of Egypt, and the frogs came up and covered the land of Egypt. The magicians did the same by their secret arts and made frogs come up on the land of Egypt. Then Pharaoh called Moses and Aaron and said, plead with the Lord to take away the frogs from me and from my people, and I will let the people go to sacrifice to the Lord. Moses said to Pharaoh, be pleased to command me when I am to plead for you and for your servants and for your people, that the frogs may be cut off from you and your houses and be left only in the Nile. And he said, tomorrow. Moses said, be it as you say, so that you may know that there is no one like the Lord our God. The frogs shall go away from you and your houses and your servants and your people. They should be left only in the Nile. So Moses and Aaron went out from the Pharaoh, and Moses cried to the Lord about the frogs. So as he had agreed with Pharaoh, and the Lord did according to the word of Moses. The frogs died out in the houses, the courtyards, and the fields, and they gathered them together in heaps, and the land stank. But when Pharaoh saw that there was a respite, he hardened his heart and would not listen to them as the Lord had said. Okay, The magicians may create the same situation or the illusion of creating it. I mean, once blood is in all the water or frogs are in every corner, how could anyone tell that they are creating more of the same? I don't get that. But as you pointed out, they don't undo anything. That would impress me. Pharaoh still needs God to remove the problems.
I'm with you. I don't get these magicians. I mean, why are they just doing things to make things worse? There's already frogs. So we're going to give you more frogs. And I'm telling you, when you were reading all of that, I got this mental picture. I hate frogs. and we have a kind of a little pond ditch thing in our backyard. And sometimes if we have a lot of rain, then we have a lot of frogs and they are everywhere and they gross me out. And so the thought of them jumping on me and getting in my kneading bowl and coming in my house, and they make
in
noises
your bed.
too. Oh, and they make noises. So,
yeah.
I mean, it gets really, really loud. And then they start dying and they smell bad. And so far we've had blood and frogs. Ugh. So let's see what happens next. Exodus 8:16 through 19. Then the Lord said to Moses, say to Aaron, stretch out your staff and strike the dust of the earth so that it becomes gnats in all the land of Egypt. And they did so. Aaron stretched out his hand with the staff and struck the dust of the earth, and there were gnats on man and beast. All the dust of the earth became gnats in the land of Egypt. The magicians tried by their secret arts to produce gnats, but they could not. So there were gnats on man and beast. Then the magician said to Pharaoh, this is the finger of God. But Pharaoh's heart was hardened, and he would not listen to them as the Lord said. Okay, just now you're getting that this is the finger of God. I mean, really slowly. Oh, and then I think about those bugs. I mean, before the blood, you could kind of stay away from the frogs. Maybe you could barricade yourself into a room somewhere or something, but the gnats on man and beast. So now even the animals were suffering. Of course, I guess the animals suffered when there was stink and smell and all that stuff too. If you don't know what a gnat is, they're those little teeny tiny flying things, and they get in your nose and your mouth, and it was probably hard to breathe without sucking them into your body. Ugh. But the magicians are going to Pharaoh and they're saying, look, Pharaoh, this is God. We can't do this. This is God. But once again, Pharaoh didn't care. And I think it was interesting because it said that one of these said something like there was a reprieve or there was a
respite,
like a respite. Yeah. And so I just thought, you know what? You need to go out there and be with your people.
Mm-hmm.
All right.
Okay. Well, I don't believe the children of Israel suffered from the plagues, but they lived in the Nile's Delta area called Goshen. And it seems God focused the suffering of the plagues on the rest of the country. When the people whose lives depend on pleasing the cruel leader, whose lives depend on him, the cruel leaders say we can't, it's a pretty big deal. So for those guys to say we can't do this, that was taking a risk there. It means the leader could take away their jobs at the least or just execute them. There are different types of gnats, and actually some versions will say lice or some other kind of swarming bug, but some gnats will bite, some don't, but they all fly in clouds. And I once lived in a neighborhood with a creek that ran below our yards. And that year I was infested with no-see-ums. They were tiny little black dots of a bug that they invaded our homes. I would walk in my front door and suddenly I would look at my arms were covered with little black bugs, little spots. And they flew in my face. In no time, my body was covered with tiny, painful, itchy bites. Yeah, I still have scars from those 10 months later. I would not have wanted to be in Egypt at this time at all.
Okay, so you really don't think that the Egyptians suffered, because I know the
Egyptians did. That. The Hebrews didn't.
I mean, not the Egyptians, the Hebrews suffered that, and that makes more sense that God wouldn't punish his people. Mm-hmm. But I know in a minute we're going to read where there was like a difference between what happened there and what happened in Egypt. So let's just keep going.
Okay, verses 20 to 32 of chapter 8. Then the Lord said to Moses, rise up early in the morning and present yourself to Pharaoh as he goes out into the water, and say to him, thus says the Lord, let my people go, that they may serve me. Or else, if you will not let my people go, behold, I will send swarms of flies on you and your servants and your people and into your houses, and the houses of the Egyptians shall be filled with swarms of flies, and also the ground on which they stand. That on that day I will set apart the land of Goshen, where my people dwell, so that no swarms of flies shall be there, that you may know that I am the Lord in the midst of the earth. Thus I will put a division between my people and your people. Tomorrow this sign shall happen. And the Lord did so. There came great swarms of flies into the houses of Pharaoh and into his servants' houses. Throughout all the land of Egypt, the land was ruined by the swarms of flies. Then Pharaoh called Moses and Aaron and said, go, sacrifice to your God within the land. But Moses says it would not be right to do so. For the offerings we shall sacrifice to the Lord our God are an abomination to the Egyptians. If we sacrifice offerings abominable to the Egyptians before their eyes, will they not stone us? We must go 3 days' journey into the wilderness and sacrifice to the Lord our God as he tells us. So Pharaoh said, all right, I will let you go to sacrifice to the Lord your God in the wilderness, only you must not go very far away. Plead for me. Then Moses said, behold, I am going out from you, and I will plead with the Lord that the swarms of flies may depart from Pharaoh, from his servants, and from his people tomorrow. Only let not Pharaoh cheat again by not letting the people go to sacrifice to the Lord. So Moses went out from Pharaoh and prayed to the Lord, and the Lord did as Moses asked and removed the swarms of flies from Pharaoh, from his servants, and from his people. Not one remained. But Pharaoh hardened his heart this time also, and did not let his people go. Okay, Pharaoh is trying to negotiate with God. He'll let the people sacrifice, give them a short time off from work, but he wants to keep the leash on them so they can't go away completely. And God seems to be tolerating the compromise, but once again, Pharaoh reneges on the deal he himself had proposed. The problem Moses mentioned about making the Egyptians mad if they sacrificed sheep, that's a strange one. Egyptians had gods that were rams. So in that sense, the animals were revered. But at the same time, they thought of sheep as unclean. Since the Hebrews were sheep herders, they were in a can't win for losing situation with Egypt.
Yeah, I that is weird. I hadn't thought about it that way, but I think it's this reading here where he talks about he's going to draw a line between where the Egyptians are and the land of Goshen. There's not going to be any flies there. And I think that's where I kind of got the idea that up until now, the things had happened to the Israelites, because now it seems like now he's drawing that line. Yeah. So that's where I got that from. But either way, this was a miserable situation for the Egyptians. Mm-hmm. And I don't know. We didn't really talk about this ahead of time either, but there's there's a few times in scripture that you look at it and you think, I don't understand, but that's where trust comes in, because there was never the plan to come back after the 3 days.
Right.
I mean, they were, but yet God is telling Moses to tell Pharaoh, we're going to be gone for 3 days.
Well, we're getting to see exactly how stubborn Pharaoh is, that even when he gets the deal that he offered, it's still rejected. I mean, he still rejects it himself again. So God's giving him another chance to prove how untrustworthy he is.
Oh, man.
He's a mess.
Moses is terrible. All right, so God is really showing his power here, but Moses has really stepped up here. Look at verse 26. But Moses said it would not be right to do so, for the offerings we sacrifice to the Lord our God are in an abomination to the Egyptians. If we sacrifice offerings and abominable to the Egyptians before their eyes, will they not stone us? So Moses had whined to God that he wasn't a good speaker. But this shows that God truly was with the mouth of Moses, because Moses had an answer, a real legitimate answer for what Pharaoh came up with. And now we're back to the flies. I'm just so much of a girl. I just cannot picture. I mean, I can, but I just can't imagine everything. We get one fly in the house that drives me crazy until I can kill it. I just can't imagine having flies like that. And then I start trying to picture, what would that look like? That between the land of Goshen and the land of Egypt, there's tons of flies. And then all of a sudden, none at all. And
it reminded me what Goshen's like. I'm sorry, go ahead. Which name?
Well, it kind of reminded me, how, I don't know if you've ever experienced this, where you're driving and it's raining, and then all of a sudden, boom, you're out of the rain, and you can see that break, that curtain between where the rain is falling and where the rain is not falling. So no, I don't know much about the land of Goshen. Tell us.
Well, the location of it is in the north part of Egypt, where the delta of the Nile River empties into the Mediterranean. And so they're right in this lovely area where it's really lush land, because it's all tributaries and everything from the delta. And it's also closer to the sea, Mediterranean Sea. So all of that probably is creating a kind of a buffer area for them, where they wouldn't experience all of the same things, but either way, God's making sure that it stays away from them too. So the location where he's placed them all this time, plus his own power, is protecting them from everything.
I know, but I just think, what would it look like to stand there and see? Because in my mind, I get not just a few flies, but flies like the gnats. And then all of a, like a straight line. It's like they're here. And then on this side, there's nothing, not one.
God's
that
power.
Would be, yeah. I mean, talk about power over nature. I mean, I know he created nature, but I get that mental picture, and it's just amazing. It's just amazing. How could you not love and worship a God like that? So, all right. The next time we get together, we're going to finish the plagues if I can stand it. If I can hang in there. And I'm not even there. I'm just reading it, and it's still like freaking me out. We'll finish the plagues, and we'll get to watch as the Israelites leave Egypt, just as God said they would. But for today, our time is up. So, what do you think's going to happen, Pam?
I'm still hearing that scary pounding music every time Pharaoh opens his foolish mouth, and it's going to get louder.
Yeah, it does that on the scary movies, where it starts out a little soft and gets bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's exactly right. All right, ladies, before we leave you, I like to do a few applications. So the first thing that I noticed was that evil men have power too. And these magicians were not from God. Revelation 21:8 says, but as for the cowardly, the fatherless, the detestable, as for the murderers, the sexual immoral, sorcerers, idolaters, and all liars, their portion will be in the lake that burns with fire and sulfur, which is the second death. So these magicians, these sorcerers, did not get their power from God, and God is not in any way condoning what they're doing. And so I'm not talking about a cute magic show here where everybody knows it's a trick or sleight of hand or anything like that. I'm talking about the magicians that, as we've been talking about, actually made the people's situation worse, but they were maybe using dark forces of some kind. I don't know, but I just know that what they were doing was not from God, and God condemns sorcery. So don't get involved in that stuff. It's not good. It's not good. All right. And the second thing I noticed was some people's hearts will never soften. There will be a Pharaoh in our own lives today. People are going to choose to reject God and his son, Jesus. And that's not on us. When we've done all that we can to reach someone, we need to move on and shake the dust from our feet. All we need to do is plant that seed of God's truth, and it's up to them to allow it to grow. We have no control over that. God did harden Pharaoh's heart, as he said he would, but Pharaoh was already a cruel oppressor. And that's why the Israelites cried out to God in the first place. So don't let these evil people make you discouraged. Don't get stuck on one. Keep moving, because just keep planting. God gives the increase. All we need to do is do the planting. And then the third thing that I've noticed is God's power is far greater than anything we can imagine, and his heart is even greater. And that's one thing I love about God. He just has such a powerful love, and he is love. But he's not going to be mocked. And I've heard people say, oh, well, God is such a loving God, and he wouldn't send anybody to heaven, but God will do as he said he will do. And we've only covered 4 of the plagues. And trust me when I say that there's more death and suffering to come. We serve a mighty and powerful God, but we also serve a God who demands respect and obedience. And that's something that we need to remember, because he said in our earlier lesson, I am I am. And so that's who he is. And he's in charge, and it's not us. All right. This story is far from being over. But you got to join us for the last chapter to see if the Israelites get to leave in style with all the goodies from their neighbors. But unfortunately, we got a few icky parts to go through first. But please come back. All right, Pam, do you have anything else you wanted to say before we?
No, we just got to get through this whole thing.
I know, and that's
6 more.
Yes, yes. All right, you ladies have a blessed day, and please come back for our next session.